My sister became my office manager. She used every chance to mock my accent and humiliate me during meetings. I was forced to resign. Years later, she stood in line begging for a job. I just smiled and said next. "You don't seriously expect me to call you my boss, do you?" she said with a half smile, half sneer. That was the first sentence Brielle said to me when she walked into the Atlanta office. I was sitting at my desk, unpacking a box of personal things. I'd just transferred back from Chicago after a merger moved my department to the South. I hadn't spoken to Brielle in years, not since the fallout after Mom passed. She hadn't come to the funeral. Claimed she couldn't get time off. Truth was, she didn't want to be there. She and I were different species altogether. Growing up, I'd always been the quiet one. The one who stayed in my room, listened to BBC radio, and wrote essays for fun. She was the outgoing American-born baby of the family, all sass and smiles and sharp tongue. Even as a teenager, Brielle would find a way to turn everything into a joke at my expense. My accent? Cute but confusing. My friends? Your book club mates? My wardrobe? Vintage or just outdated? But I thought we'd grown out of it. Adults now. Professional women in the same company. God, I was wrong. The company had just merged, and my longtime role in client services was evolving. I was now overseeing a team of 12. Apparently, the corporate had brought in Brielle from the Dallas branch as my new operations manager. HR liaison. Meeting organizer. Internal process lead. In other words, the person who stood behind me, listened to everything I said, and somehow made me feel like a child in front of my own team. The first few weeks, it was subtle. An eye roll during meetings. A little smirk when I mispronounced something. An occasional joke about how the Brits invented the language but forgot how to use it. The first time she mocked me in front of the team, I laughed it off. Sibling banter, I said, feeling heat crawl up my neck. But then it became constant. I'll rephrase that, she'd say after I explained a strategy. "Oh, she means marketing funnel, not whatever that UK term was," she once quipped, as if I were speaking ancient Greek. The team started looking at her instead of me. I could feel it, the shift. They'd glance at her for confirmation when I spoke. I tried addressing it privately. Once, I pulled her into the break room and said, "We need to be on the same page." She popped a gum bubble and said, "Then maybe try speaking the same language." That night, I cried in the car before driving home. I thought about quitting then. But I'd moved states. I'd sold my condo. This was my career. I'd earned my place. I wasn't going to let Brielle chase me out. But she did. It took about 6 months for her to unravel my authority, slowly, methodically. She started questioning my decisions in team meetings, always with that fake smile that screamed, "I'm just trying to help." I stopped getting invited to client brainstorms. I found out, through a junior staff member, that she'd told HR I was struggling to communicate with the team due to my communication style. She meant my accent, my vocabulary, my tone. Eventually, I got called into a meeting with the regional VP. She talked about restructuring, and how they needed someone with a stronger connection to the Atlanta culture. I resigned before they could fire me. I didn't even say goodbye to most of the team. I left my office the same way I came in, quietly, alone, and with a cardboard box under my arm. For a long time, I couldn't talk about it. Not even to my friends. I felt ashamed. Defeated. I questioned whether I was too sensitive, whether I had misread everything. But deep down, I knew. She had done it on purpose. Back in Chicago, I freelanced for a while. Did some branding projects. Nothing major. Then, one of my former clients reached out and asked if I'd be interested in helping her launch a skincare line. I took the job, and it blew up. Suddenly, I was getting calls. Referrals. I hired a few contractors, then eventually registered my own LLC. Aster Digital was born in 2021. I ran it out of a co-working space at first, just me and 2 interns from Columbia College. A year later, we had a proper office in River North, downtown Chicago. By 2023, we were working with tech startups, nonprofits, and small businesses. My team had grown to 25. I never forgot Brielle. I didn't think about her often, but when I did, it was with a knot in my stomach. Not hate. Just that raw, unhealed feeling you get when someone close to you betrays you so subtly that nobody else sees it. Then, last November, we posted about our open hiring day for junior coordinators. Walk-ins welcome. Resumes in hand. Come as you are. That morning, I was wearing a navy pantsuit and my favorite silver pen clipped to my clipboard. I walked down the hallway to the waiting area where we had a line of about 20 candidates. Mostly recent grads. A few older folks looking for a change. And there she was. Brielle. Hair shorter, face thinner, wearing a blazer that looked one size too big. She didn't see me. She was fiddling with a resume, biting her lip. I froze. My heart pounded like I was back in that office again. I looked down at the sign-in sheet. Kingsley, Brielle. Time slot, 10:45 a.m. I walked into the interview room. Took a deep breath. Called out, next. She walked in with a practiced smile. It faltered the second her eyes met mine. Her face dropped. She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Just a little exhale. I looked at her. Looked down at her resume. Looked back up. Then I said, "Thank you for coming. We'll be in touch." She blinked, stunned. Aria, but I stood up, nodded, and walked to the door. Next, I said, without looking back. She didn't follow. She didn't speak. I didn't need to hear what she had to say. I don't know if that makes me petty. I know people grow. I know people change. But some wounds don't heal with time. Some apologies come too late. And sometimes, you get to choose who walks into your second chance, and who gets left outside the door. After that moment, after I said next, I kept my face still and my voice calm, but inside, I felt like I'd swallowed lightning. It wasn't pride. It wasn't vengeance. It was released. I had spent so long carrying the weight of those humiliations, of being made to feel like I was small, difficult to understand, out of place in my own workplace. And now, here I was, deciding who fit into the company I built with my own damn hands. But once the door closed behind Brielle, I didn't linger in the moment. I had 10 more interviews to conduct, and some of those candidates were hungry, talented, and eager to learn. I gave them my full attention. Still, I'd be lying if I said her face didn't haunt me a little over the next few days. It wasn't just a surprise in her expression. It was something deeper, confusion, maybe. Disbelief. Regret? That night, I sat on my couch in my apartment in Lincoln Park with a mug of tea and the city lights flickering through the windows. I scrolled through LinkedIn, not even looking for anything in particular. Old habits. Out of curiosity, or maybe masochism, I searched for her profile again. Still no new job listed. Still open to work. A few endorsements from years ago. Sparse connections. I clicked out and told myself it didn't matter. But the truth is, what she did still lived in me like scar tissue. Not fresh anymore, but tight in certain places. I didn't wish her failure, not truly. But I also didn't owe her anything. And I sure as hell didn't owe her a seat at my table. The next week, I got a call from one of my employees, Kendra. She was heading our culture and hiring initiatives. "Hey Aria," she said hesitantly, "I don't mean to stir the pot, but someone from the open hiring session posted something online. They mentioned that you turned away a candidate who was your sister?" I sighed, pinched the bridge of my nose. Let me guess, on Glassdoor? No, actually. It was on Reddit. Of course it was. She sent me the link. The post wasn't from Brielle, but it was vague enough to protect identities. Still, it didn't take long for people to piece it together. Small industry, after all. Some defended me. Others speculated. A few said things like, family deserves a second chance. I didn't respond. Not publicly, not privately. But I did start writing this. Not to clap back. Not to justify myself. Just to sort through it all. Because even now, I keep turning it over in my mind. That moment. That power. That choice. I didn't respond to the Reddit post. I didn't have the energy, nor the desire, to step into a public spectacle that reduced a years-long, deeply personal experience into a gotcha moment. But it stuck with me. For the next few weeks, I found myself thinking back to the aftermath of our mother's death, how that was the first real break between Brielle and me. I had flown back to the UK to handle the arrangements. Our mother's wish was to be buried near her own parents in Lancashire, and I honored that. Brielle? She didn't even make the flight. Flights are insane right now, she texted. That was the only message I got. Our dad never commented on it. He never took sides between us, but I think he knew what her absence meant to me. After the funeral, when I called to check on him, he just said, "You did right by your mum. That's what matters." That was the last time he and I talked about Brielle for years. We both knew poking the wound wouldn't heal it. After the open hiring day, I debated telling him that I'd seen her. I drove down to visit him one weekend. He's still in Decatur, living in the same house we grew up in. It's quieter now, smaller somehow. The rooms feel frozen in time, like our childhood echoes still cling to the walls. He made us tea the old way, with milk and sugar, and we sat in the den where he still keeps our school portraits up on the shelf. Brielle's photo from senior year, curly hair, big smile, maroon cap and gown, looked almost like a stranger to me. "I saw Brielle," I finally said. He looked up from his cup. "Yeah?" "She came to a hiring event. For my company." He was quiet for a long moment. "Did you talk?" "Not really." "Is she okay?" I shrugged. "Didn't look like she's doing great." Didn't have much to say, either. Dad exhaled, slowly. "She's always been stubborn. But she's not evil, Arya." "I know that." We didn't talk about it further. He didn't push. And I didn't offer more. But driving back to Chicago that Sunday night, I kept replaying it in my mind, how we were just two kids once, making blanket forts in the living room, eating cereal in front of cartoons. How did we get here? How did she end up being the person who actively hampered me at work? And how did I end up in a place where I could look her in the eye, say nothing, and still hurt her? The truth is, I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't even feel justified. I just felt distant from it all. Like I'd crossed some invisible threshold. The version of me that had wept in a company bathroom stall while she mocked my speech? That woman was long gone. I didn't want revenge. I just wanted peace. About 2 weeks after the hiring event, I got an email. From her. Subject line, "I think we should talk." I didn't open it right away. In fact, I stared at it in my inbox for a solid 5 minutes. The preview line said, "I wasn't expecting to see you that day, and I'm sorry if," and then it cut off. I closed the laptop. I left it alone for a day. Then too. It wasn't about power anymore. It wasn't about holding a grudge or being afraid of what she'd say. It was about me trying to decide if opening the email meant reopening a chapter one had very carefully closed. Eventually, I read it. And it was more restrained than I thought it would be. She didn't beg. She didn't grovel. But she also didn't deny anything. Here's part of what she wrote. "I know I was a terrible sister. I thought I was being clever or funny or whatever, but I was insecure and I took it out on you. You didn't deserve what happened in Atlanta. When I saw you the other day, I realized how far I've fallen and how far you've come. I was shocked, yeah, but more than that, I was ashamed. I don't know if we'll ever be friends, or if we even should be. But I wanted to say it out loud, I was wrong. You deserved better. And I'm sorry. There was no ask. No request for a job. No phone number. Just her name at the bottom. Brielle. I read it again the next morning. Then I didn't reply. Not right away. Because even when someone offers an apology, there's still the part of you that has to decide what you're going to do with it. Do you hold it? Frame it? Toss it aside? And I hadn't figured that out yet. Meanwhile, life went on. My team was in the thick of Q1 planning, and we had just landed a client based in Toronto that wanted a cross-platform campaign rollout. I was busy, and grateful for it. But Brielle's message still sat in the back of my mind. I hadn't deleted it. I hadn't archived it either. It just lived there, suspended in limbo, much like the feelings I still hadn't sorted through. One day, I caught myself wondering what would have happened if we'd worked together under different circumstances. If we hadn't grown up divided by cultures, insecurities, unspoken resentment. And that thought unsettled me more than anything else. Because maybe we weren't always doomed. Maybe we just never learned how to be on the same team. I didn't reply to Brielle's email for nearly 2 weeks. Not because I was angry, not because I wanted to punish her with silence. It was more like I was letting it settle. Letting myself observe how it felt to have her apology just exist, without needing to respond to it. It was strange, honestly, peaceful and unsettling at the same time. In a way, I felt like a completely different person from the woman who once swallowed tears in the Atlanta office bathroom after another of her smug one-liners. This new me had employees, a reputation, a future she'd built on her own terms. But that version of me still lived inside somewhere too, watching cautiously, still half expecting to be undermined again. It was a Thursday evening when I finally replied. Just one sentence, thanks for the message. I appreciate you saying that. I didn't know if it was cold or kind. It was simply honest. I meant it. She responded the next day, that means a lot. I won't take up more of your time, but thank you for reading it. And that was it. I didn't hear from her again. At least, not directly. But she began to appear, almost like a soft echo, in conversations. One of my industry contacts mentioned she'd applied to a nonprofit marketing role he was hiring for. He called me to ask, would you vouch for her? I paused. That strange, stomach-twisting moment again, being given the power to decide her fate, to pass judgment. I wouldn't say she's unethical, I said carefully. But I'd recommend clear boundaries if you hire her. She's capable. Just be mindful. He thanked me and said that helped. I never found out if she got the job. I didn't ask. Weeks passed. Spring thawed the gray slush of a long Chicago winter, and I threw myself into work. Our Toronto launch went well, we brought on 2 new interns, and I started mentoring a recent grad who reminded me of myself at 25, sharp, reserved, determined to prove she belonged. And yet, under all the motion and progress, there was still that lingering quiet between me and Brielle. That strange, unresolved thread. Not tension exactly. Just the absence of what once was, no family texts, no check-ins from Dad about whether we'd reconnected, no spontaneous gestures to rebuild what had eroded. Around that time, Dad's health started to decline more noticeably. Nothing sudden, just the small, telltale shifts, slower movement, breathless after stares, the forgetting of simple appointments. I visited more often, sometimes staying a weekend, cooking for him, sorting his meds, encouraging him to consider a nurse. He brushed it off every time. Still sharp enough to beat you at chess, he'd say with a grin. He hadn't beaten me in years. One Sunday, after he'd dozed off in his recliner mid-sentence, I found myself standing in the hallway, staring at a framed photo of us, me, Brielle, and Dad at Stone Mountain Park. I must have been 12. She was holding a bag of kettle corn half her size, laughing at something I was saying. It hit me harder than I expected. We weren't always at odds. Before the accents and the resentment and the power plays, we were just two girls trying to belong. Her in America, me in the shadow of where we came from. I'd clung to identity. She'd run from it. Maybe we were both surviving in the only ways we knew how. I don't know why that moment softened something in me. Maybe it was seeing Dad aging so quickly. Maybe it was my own exhaustion with carrying bitterness that no longer served a purpose. But I decided to send her one more email. Simple again. Dad's been slowing down. You might want to call him. She responded quickly. I've been thinking about that too. Thanks, Arya. I'll reach out this week. He didn't mention her name when I next visited. But I noticed he had that lightness again, the one he used to carry when he talked about both of us together. I didn't ask. I didn't need to. Something was shifting. Not dramatically. Not quickly. But a layer at a time. I didn't invite her to visit. And she didn't ask. We stayed in that delicate limbo, aware of each other, quietly orbiting, no longer colliding. Back at the office, things were moving at a relentless pace. One of our senior strategists was going on maternity leave, and I was considering stepping back into a more hands-on client role. I missed the work sometimes, branding, strategy, big-picture thinking. It reminded me of why I started Aster in the first place. And then, unexpectedly, Brielle's name surfaced again. This time, it was from Kendra, again. Hey, she said, knocking lightly on my door. Don't freak out, but I think Brielle applied for the associate HR manager role. I blinked. She didn't apply under her full name, just B. Kingsley. But I recognized the resume format from last time. My mouth was dry. What should we do? Kendra shrugged, half smiling. I was gonna toss it, but figured I should check with you first. Could just be coincidence. I nodded slowly. No, it's her. I took the resume from her hands. I didn't know what I expected to feel holding it, but it wasn't anger. It was curiosity, maybe. A little sadness. Her qualifications weren't stellar, but they weren't bad either. She'd bounced around a lot. Still didn't have any long-term roles there. But the experience added up. She really applied? I murmured, half to myself. She did, Kendra said. Want me to reject her? I didn't answer right away. Because that was the moment I realized something. I had forgiven her, at least partly. But I hadn't decided what forgiveness meant. Did it mean letting her back in? Trusting her again? Or was it enough to just not hate her anymore? I let the resume sit on my desk for the rest of the afternoon. I didn't touch it. I barely looked at it. I just let it be there, this strange symbol of a past I thought I'd left behind, now folded neatly onto 2 pages in my office, asking to be considered. By the end of the day, I made my decision. I walked into Kendra's office. Shortlist her, I said. Let's bring her in for an interview. But I want to be the one who interviews her. Alone. Kendra raised an eyebrow but nodded. Sure. Are you good with that? I am now. I didn't tell her everything. I didn't need to. This wasn't about theater. This wasn't about spectacle. This was about closure. A week later, Brielle walked through the glass doors of Aster Digital for the second time. She looked better than she had at the walk-in session. More polished. Hair styled. A navy suit and sensible heels. She didn't spot me at first. She was greeted by our receptionist, handed a clipboard to confirm her info, and led into the small conference room we used for first rounds. I waited exactly 3 minutes, then stepped in. She looked up, and froze again. This time, she didn't look surprised. She just looked prepared. Hi, Brielle, I said, taking a seat across from her. Thanks for coming in. She nodded. Thank you for considering it. We sat in silence for a second. I looked down at her resume, then back at her. So, I began, why asked her. Why now? She took a breath. Because it's a company built with integrity. Because your team has a reputation for being forward-thinking, inclusive, and sharp. Because I know what it feels like to be shut out, and I'd like to help build a company where people don't feel that way. I said nothing. Just watched her. Waited. Finally, she added, and because I'd been on the other side of that table too many times, and I know I need to start earning trust, not just asking for it. It was, surprisingly, a good answer. But that wasn't why I brought her in. I leaned forward, calm and direct. You humiliated me in front of clients, Brielle. You cost me a job I loved. You made me feel small in ways I still carry. I built this company from scratch after you tore down the last place I had. She looked down. Didn't interrupt. I continued. So let me be perfectly clear. You are not getting this job. She nodded slowly, lips pressed into a thin line. I figured. I didn't bring you in here to hurt you. Or to make a scene. I brought you here so you could hear me say it, to your face, with calm, and with clarity. I leaned back. You are not welcome here. She didn't cry. She didn't beg. She sat there quietly, the way I had once sat across from an executive when he told me I was being restructured out of a position I'd poured my life into. This place, I said, gesturing around the glass walls, the floor-to-ceiling windows, the bustle of creative energy just beyond, is what I made out of the ashes of what you helped burn. I want you to remember that. She gave a tight nod. I will. I stood and offered my hand. She shook it, firmly, but her fingers trembled slightly. Take care, Brielle. You too, Arya. And just like that, she left. I watched her walk down the corridor, past the team she would never be part of, past the receptionist who had no idea the story behind the interview. I watched the door close behind her. And it was done. It wasn't loud. It wasn't cruel. But it was justice. Over the next few days, I felt lighter. Like something toxic had finally been expelled from my system. I hadn't sunk to her level. I hadn't destroyed her. But I had reclaimed the power she once held over me, and I'd done it without raising my voice or lowering my standards. Dad called a week later. She told me you interviewed her, he said cautiously. I did. She also said you were fair. Tough, but fair. I was. He paused. She said she needed that. I didn't respond. Arya, he said, I know this has all been hard. But I'm proud of you. Your mom would be too. That caught me. I blinked fast, rubbed my eyes, and thanked him. Later that night, I stood in the Astor break room with a cup of tea in hand. I watched the sun setting over the city, orange and gold bleeding into glass towers. Behind me, I could hear my team laughing over Slack memes, the whir of espresso machines, the buzz of ambition. This was my space. My legacy. My voice. And no one, not even family, would ever take that from me again. That was the end of her chapter in my life. And the beginning of mine, fully and truly.